Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DataOps panel of the DevOps Summit 2021. I'm your moderator, Gautam Palapa. I'm an executive advisor at VMware focusing on business transformation. I'm the founder of Transformity, business transformation thought leadership venture, and an ambassador for the DevOps Institute. My mantra is transform with empathy. And today's topic of DataOps, the key trends for 2022 and beyond, really resonates with me from an organizational transformation and a technology rationalization perspective. It's indeed an exciting topic to discuss and a timely one at that, with the world shifting to a contactless, digital first, and a remote operating model. This panel is part of the data and DevOps track at DevOps Summit this year. And just like you all in the audience, I'm looking forward to an insightful and entertaining and knowledgeable session today. I'm joined today by illuminary and distinguished technologists in the DevOps and the DataOps space, and I'm honored to be moderating this panel. And so to kick things off, I was thinking that we can start the discussion with a brief intro of each of you and help the audience get a glimpse of what DataOps actually means to you specifically. I'd like to use a popcorn approach with this, where I start the ball rolling, have someone else introduce themselves, and then they can pick the next person to introduce and so on. And then after everyone has introduced themselves, I'll jump in. So I'm going to pick Kent.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Gotham, and thanks for having me on the panel here. I'm Kent Graziano. I'm the Chief Technical Evangelist for Snowflake, the data cloud. Been in the data space for over 30 years now, mostly in warehousing, analytics, and things of that nature. I'm actually a data architect and modeler I'll say by trade, prior to getting this fantastic gig with Snowflake. I come to the data ops world via Agile. I started working with the Agile movement in the early 2000s and finding ways to adapt the Agile manifesto, Agile methodologies and thought and mindset to the data space for data warehousing. And so for me, this move that we've had in the last couple of years to data ops is very exciting, because we're finally getting to the point where we're really I'll say becoming one with the Agile movement into the data world and applying Agile thought and DevOps processes and things like that to data. That's something that's been lacking for several decades, and so I'm very excited to see that. And it's really meeting a lot of needs that I see within our own customer base as we've moved into the cloud and the data has gotten massively bigger than what it was when I first started in my career. We really need to be able to get our hands on it, and automation, but that's the way to go, right? If we're going to be agile, part of being agile in my mind is being able to automate more and more so that we make fewer mistakes ourselves. All right. So let me see. I think I will toss it over to Joe.
Hey, thanks, Ken. Joe Reese from Ternary Data. We are a data engineering consulting firm based in Salt Lake City, but we kind of serve everybody these days around the world. So data ops, it's an interesting one. I mean, I guess I've been inadvertently doing it for a long time, even though I didn't know what it was called. My background has always been in data of some sort, but I'd also say applied to business in a lot of capacities, in particular supply chain and operations. And so I have a background in lean, for example. And so when I discovered Agile, actually, it made a ton of sense, because it's basically just lean practices applied to software. And so, when data ops started happening, I was like, that's cool too. It really resonates. So, so I'm excited to talk more about data ops. I think it's an interesting time for data ops, and that it's, I think, a word that a lot of people use and throw around. I'm still curious as to what people's opinions are on the meaning and application of data ops. I think in a lot of regards, people are already doing it, but maybe there needs to be a bit more clarity, hopefully from this panel on that. So looking forward to it.
All right.
And then I guess I'll toss it next to Ben.
Thanks, Joe.
Of course.
So hi, I'm Ben. I'm chief scientist for Satori. We are partly familiar with some of the guys here. We are Snowflake technology partners and also partners with Leading Edge with Chris. And I also recently wrote a book about Snowflake security, and where I meet DataOps. First of all, in my background, we were dealing with a lot of data, and we were when I was leading research for Imperva, for example, we had our research had massive amounts of data, and there were a lot of challenges around data operations and how we get data fast and how do we secure data when it's being analyzed by our teams and by other teams in the organization. And I'm fascinated by embedding security into DataOps, by doing DataSecOps, and how we don't repeat mistakes from the past that were done when the world was going through the DevOps revolution, how we can eliminate some of those and accelerate the way we integrate security into data operations. That's me. And passing the ball to Chris.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, so I'm Chris Tabb. So I'm a partner in Leading Edge IT. Been in the data space since the early 90s, started at Cognos. More recently working with latest and greatest technology out there like Snowflake, Satori, to name a couple. What interests me about DataOps, it's that reduced friction to life, getting things to life. I've been worked on so many projects where people try to do big bang releases or fail because of the world has moved on since they started coding. So just that iterative approach of the business meeting technology. So DevOps was always very much technology focused. That DataOps is bringing the two things together, that agile, that business trained, that features, bringing the two things together. And I think that's a game changer, bringing those two things and adding security to it as well. So that's what keeps me interested in it. I think it just helping getting people the value out of that data. And if DataOps help support that and make the data world a better place, then it's got to be a good thing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So one of the things, and you all mentioned it in your introductions, one of the key things that I'd like to state out here is that everyone thinks that lean, agile, and DevOps and DataOps and all these various things are separate frameworks or separate entities that do not commingle together. And what the reality is very, very different. I mean, we borrow from every one of these methodologies and practices in order to get better as a technologist, as a database, as an organization, and so on. So what I would like to do is next shift to, and Ben, I think, started with this, shift to the learnings that we've got from DevOps and what we have done to implement it. To kick this conversation off, I actually want to call upon Garima because she missed out on the introduction and introducing herself. I want you, Garima, you've been big in the DevOps community. You've started chapters in Canada, and you're driving DevOps in a wonderful way. Why don't you start off and get the ball rolling on what learnings from DevOps we've actually implemented into DataOps? And please start that with a brief introduction of yourself so that the audience knows much more about you.
Sure. So thank you, Gautam. And I'm the founder for the DevOps community of practice here in Canada, which has 3 chapters, Toronto, Ottawa, and Edmonton. I'm also the organizer for the DevOps Summit, which happens in Canada. This is the 3rd time we are hosting this conference. I'm the Chief Ambassador for Continuous Delivery Foundation, as well as Ambassador with DevOps Institute. And coming back to your question about, what are the key learnings from DevOps practitioners when we are going into DataOps, I would say, there are a lot of things which we could reflect, like incremental approach towards data, making data agile, observability is one area where we could look at engineering practices, security, as Ben had mentioned, that DevSecOps have been a shift largely from the DevOps practitioners, and how we included it in the context of DevOps is the same thing with DataOps. But I think the most important thing which we should reflect on is people. The human centricity part of these changes and transitions are often forgotten, and I think that is the biggest learning we have from the DevOps practitioners to the DataOps. You might have different types of people in DataOps, but don't leave people behind. There should be investment programs, there should be upskilling programs, and also there should be programs and centricity to bring human in loop as well as women in loop. So I would then pass it on to Gautam for some more reflections on this, but that's what I would have to say.
Awesome, Garima. Thank you. And as always, you're extremely kind, and you focus on the human centricity aspect of this. That really, really is essential, because technology is not the panacea for all our problems. It truly does come from us working together. And that's actually the basis of Lean, Agile, and DevOps and DataOps. So I want to hear the thoughts from the panel. What do you think? What are the other learnings from DevOps that we've implemented? I mean, we've all had really great background. So who wants to start and share some of the learnings that they've implemented in DataOps?
I mean, I'm gonna have to agree with Garima on this one too. I think people do come first. I mean, I always look at things from the perspective of people, process, and technology in that order. If you don't have the people, I don't think anything else really matters. We don't yet live in a world where AI kind of runs everything, and so machines don't run everything. You need people at the end of the day. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the old, to bring it back to Lean, which I think is sort of the first time I remember seeing. Are there movements like total quality and so forth, TQM and things before that? But I think Lean was the first time I saw it really get back to basics, where there was no technology really involved in Lean at all. It's just like common sense stuff. Like if something goes wrong, pull a cord, and we just stop production and fix it. So it doesn't need to be that high tech, right? But I think what Lean illustrates really is the need for people to operate in a cadence together and focus on sort of the value of the outputs really, and DevOps and DataOps I think could learn a lot from that. People are often ignored because I mean all of us in some way, shape, or form work in technology, and we probably sell technologies, and it's just a lot easier to focus on that part because it's like, here's your invoice, now you have DataOps, right? So curious about other people's perspectives though.
Yeah, and I think if we, I'm looking at the Gartner definition of DataOps, and it starts off with, it's a collaborative data management practice focused on improving communication, integration, automation of data flows between data managers and data consumers across an organization. Well, half of that is mentioning people, right? It's collaborative. We've got to learn to work together better in order to achieve these goals. We've got all this data. The challenge is, how do we use it effectively, right? How do we access it effectively? How we're getting more and more into, people want near real-time data. Everybody says real-time, but there's always some latency. So it's always going to be near real-time, right? There isn't any real time, just the time it takes for my words to reach your ears makes that not real time. It's near real time, but it all involves people, right? And improving communication, as it said, between data managers and data consumers. And that harkens back to, I think, I'll go even pre-DevOps, right? Back to Agile, right? And involving daily communication between the technologists and the business, because technology for technology's sake is useless, right? we're trying to achieve goals for the business. And we can only do that if we're actually talking to each other. And as Garima said, if you're going to have motivated teams, which is one of the principles of Agile, and self-organizing teams, you have to have the training. You have to provide the staff with the tools, whether it's learning or actual technical tools like, say, Satori, to achieve those goals. It all revolves around having the right people, right? And having the people engaged and having that open communication back and forth, because otherwise, yeah, we're just pushing data around for no real good reason, right? And taking a lot of time. And so I think that's one of the things, again, coming all the way back from the Agile movement of it really is, you have to focus on the people and what goals you're trying to achieve and the motivations. Why are we involved in this? Why are we even trying to do this in order to achieve whatever goals it is we're trying to do?
I think it's that community
like
thing.
to-
Sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so yeah, I think I'd like to say it always goes back to that community thing. And if everyone knows what everyone else is doing and understands why they're doing it, there's going to be much less friction in you being able to achieve that. And that community doesn't need to be hierarchical. And the other thing I was like to say is technology is easy. It's the people that is the hard part. And I think the point maybe Kent or Joe says that we are technologists, and maybe we focus too much on that because that's where we're more at home. But it's nothing without the people. So yeah, just really supporting those other comments.
So what I would like to say, I'm not sure it's going to be a popular opinion, but one of the differences that I see between DevOps and DataOps, when we are mentioning DataOps, in many cases, at least the organizations I speak with, they refer mainly to the analytic data, less to the transactional data that drives the application themselves, more about the analytic data. And part of what's going on with data democratization and the enablement of more people within the organization to use data in novel ways, like many more teams than they're used to access data. That brings me to the difference that I want to mention. In the DevOps world, it's mainly the technical part of the company that were touching the applications. It's the people who write the code and the QA, automation, whatever, and it's the DevOps or the people who take these packages and make it go live and reliable and then also secure. And with data, there are many teams who are not technical and who are now enabled by great innovation to be making value from data, like with all the new BI tools or the advancement in BI tools and their move to the cloud, and with cloud data platforms, cloud data stores. But that's a different ballgame. It's not like teaching developers to write secure code, all the shift to the left, for example. And I think it's a bigger challenge for example, for security, for privacy, for governance teams, to make sure that everything is played nicely in terms of the organizational risks and compliance risks, security risks, etc. When a lot of the people who are using the data are not technical, that's a big difference the way
Actually, this brings up a really good point that I know I see a lot, and even on the engineering side too. It's like software engineers, they're not data people, or at least by training, right? And I think there's a fundamental difference between data and software engineering. And we spend a lot of our time, I would say, getting educating software engineers on how to think about data, because when you look at the data engineering lifecycle, the data lifecycle, right? Do you get data from source systems, usually managed by software engineers or teams, and then you have to do something with it. All too often, I think there's it's just they don't know. It's like, well, I don't know what you're going to do with this data, and I frankly don't really care because I have my own job to do, which is making sure the application works. I'm doing DevOps, right? Which is traditionally like if the application, so there's a fundamental difference, like you're saying, if the application works or it fails, right? You usually have tests and you deploy it and you kind of know if the application is going to work. Data is way, way, way different. The data might be wrong for a long time. You might never know, actually. I always like to say data is a silent killer in that sense where it's kind of like radon in your home or something. Like it's invisible. The mistakes they might be there. The chance of you catching it though, how do you know the data is wrong or right?
Yeah, and that's one of the big challenges, right? And part of DataOps though is not just the change control and versioning of things like table definitions, right? Yeah, it's way different than, and getting people to think of that as that's code. That's actually code, and we need to track that just like we tracked changes to C programs and Java programs. But the data itself changing, right? How do we track that? And in the incorporation, this is somewhere where in the data world we've been very, very bad at for the last couple of decades, is testing the data itself, right? And you think about a test-driven development methodology that we did in Agile is, what's the test for the data? To your point, Joe, right? Is like, how do we know that the data we loaded is, well, we can't probably say, is it right? We can say, is it the data from the source system? But that's got to be part of the data ops world, is regression testing and QA testing on the data as we're moving it into the environment or between the operational system and an analytic system. If I modify a data pipeline and I expect to get 1 million rows, did I get 1 million rows? If there's 1,020,000 rows in the source system and I only get 1 million rows in the analytics system, well, what something went wrong somewhere, and we've got to be able to diagnose that. The challenge wrapped around all of this, though, something that Ben alluded to, is governance, right? Because now we're dealing with people, we're dealing with sometimes private data, secured data, sensitive data. And one of the things that I've written about with some of my colleagues there in the UK, we did a book. We did the DataOps for Dummies, and our discussion is around agility versus agility. Sorry, governance versus agility. Right? We need both, and a lot of people think you can't have both. But if you adopt some of the DevOps approaches, automated regression testing, automated builds, CI/CD processes, automating all of that, you can do both. Because you can have the agility, but you can have it controlled in a way that we know what we're doing. We're doing it deliberately, right? But it is, as you said, Joe, very different. Getting a software engineer, and I saw this even in the Agile world, trying to do Agile data, is a Scrum Master who's managed a big web project. Doesn't necessarily get a data project, because there's a lot of different moving parts in data projects. And that's, again, back to Garima, your original statement about empowering the people and making sure that they understand and they get the training they need. You can't just take somebody who's been, running Agile programming projects and drop them into a data ops project and expect them to understand that breadth of difference between just managing code versus managing code and data.
This is a great.
To add one thing to this conversation. What DevOps actually has suffered is we have suffered a lot not getting attention from the boards for investment in DevOps capabilities. But we don't see that problem with data. There's a lot of focus from the boards. Every board is having a focus point on data analytics, which brings to us a different problem altogether. Because what we have alluded in this conversation is data is multidimensional. So the data coordinates are hard to track. Like the data which is a waste for one product is a raw material for other. Right, so you need to have proper governance, proper insights on how the data coordinates are being managed and what is the supply chain. the entire supply chain of your data. And that's, I think that is very interesting to kind of see how this whole dimension will mature. The other point which I also want to mention is in connection with what Ben, you had said, that not many people understand data that well. And I would think in my mind that data storytelling would become mainstream in the upcoming years. And we have some sessions upcoming in the DataOps track in the DevOps Summit, which talks about data storytelling. It becomes really important that we focus on that part as well.
So that actually brings a really good question, right? So we talk about data, and when we talk about data, everyone's interpretation of data is a little different because it depends upon your background, your experience, where you're coming from. It also depends upon your individual biases that you're introducing into the system and into the organization, right? Because data by itself is not going to help. It's the context that you're bringing in addition to the data that will actually improve the value and the information that you have. So for an organization that wants to go down this data ops route, and they want to assess where they currently are and where they need to go, how do we go about performing this assessment of data ops, and what metrics or measures can we use to help visualize our current state and help them plan their aspirational state or the target state that they want to get to from a data ops perspective?
I think that's one of the things you have to walk before you run. I think drift is something I like, a term that I hear quite a bit. So you've got environment drift, you've got data drift. So first of all, you need to get that benchmark. You get that point of what is your current position to see where you need to do the remediation. And then it's just working in stages. So start with the infrastructure, then maybe start with some utilities that are there. Then maybe starting with just getting your containers, your users, your roles, your DDL out there. Then comes a fun part. Then after that, you've got to have your data movement code, and it gets complicated then because everyone's using a different technology for it. One team might be using one ETL tool, one team might be using a different one. One's using store procedures, one's using Python. That's when the world gets complicated, and this is where I find with working companies, it's where that autonomy piece, or where you allow people to self-govern and make their own choices, but it's where it makes sense to standardize things to enable this data ops capability to work. Because unless you actually get all of these things done and coordinated the right way, you're not going to be successful in your business. And the standardization is one thing that comes with it, unfortunately, is unless you have that consistent way of treating this, you can't cater for every edge case, and then you're going to have some parts that are just never going to be automate, and they'll always suffer from the same problems they always have.
And I think that, fundamentally we do, in order to try to solve this, Gautam, is you have to start with the end in mind, right? Where are we trying to go? And I ask this question in many, many scenarios: is what's the business problem we're trying to solve? Okay, we think we need to adopt data ops. Okay, why? What's the problem that we have today? And part of that then leads you into the analysis of the as-is environment, right? As you're taking a look at, where do we want to be? What problem do we perceive that we have? We can't onboard new systems fast enough, or we've onboarded it, but we don't know what the lineage is. Whatever, there's some questions there that we need to solve. And then that leads us down to, okay, if we want to get to this end state, and this is our vision of what we mean by implementing data ops, then we can get to that question of where are we today? Because like Chris just said, you've got to have that baseline, right? It's like, how do you know you've gotten there if you don't know where you started?
Yep.
Right?
That's something key, right? A lot of organizations, they don't actually understand why. It's just like the buzz on the street is that all the cool kids are doing data ops, or they're doing Kubernetes if it's application development. And so I want one of those. I don't know why, but I'll figure it out. And that doesn't really help. All you're going to have is like a very expensive technical.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone reads like Accelerate, but it just humbled. They're like, oh, I guess like if I do DevOps, I'll make more money, right? And I mean, because his studies prove that out. But okay, you try and get there. It's like saying, yeah, you'll make a lot of money as an athlete if you join a professional sports organization, right? Cool. Go for it. Let's see you go try out for the Olympics next week. You know, my take too, and I like all these points. You know, to bring it back to people, I like to walk around with a pad and paper and actually just talk to people.
Nice.
And I'm pretty old school in that way, in the sense where I like to do value stream mapping and just understand. Okay, so as Ken points out, and in mind, you know, as Chris points out, systems, and it's like, okay, so what about the people interacting with these systems? What about like the clerks over in accounting, for example, who are inputting data? Like, how are you doing that? How does that work? I get pretty granular in my processes. So I really want to understand, okay, so like data comes in here. What happens before that though, right? So you get a stack of invoices, right? Is this automated or is this manual? Because I think you really need to understand like how the data comes in from inception and really understand like that time flow and break it down. That's how my mind works, at least. Again, part of it's informed my background, but I think unless you understand like how data comes in from source to sink, it's really difficult, I would say, to like set up the proper systems, because basically the organization is going to reject it.
Okay, so so let's shift gears a little bit. Right? So in an article recently, Data Kitchen mentioned that some of the key trends of 2021 were data observability, data GovOps, rise of the DataOps engineer. Our very own Ben coined the term DataSecOps, and it's catching a lot of, it's driving a lot of things. What features are we going to start seeing in 2022? Let's start looking to the future. It's already end of September, right? So Ben, why don't you start and talk about the features that you're really excited about for 2022?
So I think that this connects to, well, what you mentioned about DataSecOps and what Kent was mentioning before about data governance. It's also agile data governance, and so a couple of things around that. First of all, I think that at its core, if you ask me like what's the most important thing about DataSecOps and about bolting security into DataOps, it's the simple understanding that time to value for data is important, and that security can't be a disabler or a blocker for data. But on the other hand, data access must be secure. And it sounds like a contradiction, like the agile data governance paradox. It sounds like a contradiction, but if the mindset is that this is the balance that we need to achieve, because otherwise we will lose. Because otherwise, if our competition does that, then they will make use of the data before we do, or they will suffer less risks of not passing an audit or of data exposure or anything in between. That's something that once this mindset is understood, and once security is clear and deterministic in regards to data operations. When I'm saying deterministic, I mean that in many organizations, if you are looking for data, if you're a data consumer and you want data for achieving something, for making value, in many cases, you will either get it or you will not, but it may not be the same case. Like if I ask it in Sunday, I may get it, and Monday I may not get it. And security needs to be very clear and understood who gets what and how. For example, is it masked? Is it redacted? Am I only getting things for my region, etc., etc.? So it may be a bit complicated, but not complex, right? The security policies and the maturity of security around data. For example, things that we hardly see around applications, but we still see around data from time to time. A production database where the users table is copied to the side for tests, like actually physically copied, and the tests are done on that table. Maybe there's the transformation to keep the data private, but still things like that are not, no clear separation between staging and production, things like that. I think that hopefully they will be eliminated in 2022.
Awesome, awesome. Garima, what are your what are the features that you think are going to be exciting in 2022 for you?
Yeah, a lot has been said already. Like we will see surge in tools around data observability, data security, as well as value stream management for data and data storytelling. But I will also highlight one more thing, which I think has not been covered here. And I feel that in next 5 years, we will get more serious about cost of data. So 50% and or more than 50% cost is coming from how do you store data, what technology are you using, how that how can we take out that cost. So we will see a lot of technology revolution in terms of how this data is being stored, it's being governed, it's being managed. And there will be a lot of companies looking at improvising and evolving this technology from the infrastructure side, like storage, and how you actually manipulate that data, how databases work, and a lot of thinking will go around that evolution, that space. I can imagine that is something which will happen in next 5 years.
That's a great point, and I think a lot of executives, they don't understand that. I mean, especially organizations, they hoard all the data. They become data hoarders, and they don't understand there is a cost for the data, and it's not just the cost. There's an expiration date on the on data. They don't understand it. They just keep increasing their data lakes and have terabytes and petabytes and exabytes of data, and they think, oh, we're going to be the smartest people in the world, and they don't take any action upon it. So no, that's a really great point. Joe, features that you're excited for in 2022?
Well, what I'm most excited about, I think, is actually the intersection of data ops and ML ops, machine learning ops. To me, this is sort of the dark horse of the whole ops space right now. And in fact, I some of my friends in the ML ops communities say I'm full of it, but I actually think there's going to be an intersection between the two. Really, if you look at the functionalities of what's going on in ML ops and data ops, they're actually not that much different. So I'm most curious about this. And yeah, I just think that there's going to be a nice collision course with data, and eventually I think with DevOps in general. I think at some point, my controversial opinion is all things will just be ops once you get rid of the distinctions of dev, data, and machine learning. Because really, at the end of the day, you're just trying to reduce defects and reduce time to value, right? I mean, that's literally all you're doing. So, and I think as software engineers become more like data people, and data people become more like machine learning types, then I think the distinctions will become blurred.
Awesome. Awesome. Chris?
I think the comment about the cost is quite an interesting one. Is that a lot of companies always think of data as an asset. I like to point out is data is a liability as well, unless it's actually treated rightly, correctly. That cost optimization, I think, is going to be a big thing. I think that what I've seen recently is developers, and sorry, I'm going to offend people, got lazy recently because they can just throw more cloud resource at it. I mean, Snowflake on 6XL now. I've seen people, can I just chuck a 6XL in and will that solve the problem? No, look at the optimizer and code it right in the first place. So I think there's going to be a definite focus on cost going forward. I think the other things I'm going to see in the industry, to Joe's point, that ML ops, data ops, they are just all blending. I mean, all ML ops is really, don't say right, is adding algorithm to the ingredients. It's just that another little piece of, they all need the infrastructure, you all need the test data sets, you all need your DDL. It's just an extension of it. So yeah, I think the world not seeing the two as different things and just seeing it is data XOps or XOps or whatever piece is, because it is, to Joe's point, it is all just operations. I think the last point I'm probably making, and is to do with that, going back to finding out where the data came from originally. It's that lineage thing, that heritage thing, it's that quality check, it's that kite marking of where that data came from. Because otherwise, if someone's looking at that report and you can't say that number's correct because I've traced it all the way back and validated it, you can't say that, again, it's a liability, it's not an asset. So yeah, I there's lots going on, I think, in this space, but they're the areas I think that will definitely in 2022 we'll see some improvements on.
Awesome. Kent?
And I agree with everybody here. I mean, I think it's a convergence in the industry, and it's XOps. And what I hope to see in 2022 is more investment in the tools and companies that are building these tools to make it easier to bring that convergence together, because that is the only way we're ever going to get to that balance that we need between security, governance, and agility, is to bring all of this together. And it is a change in mindset and getting everyone across the board, agile, DevOps, DataOps, data, software engineering, into the same mindset of this is the optimal way to do things.
Awesome. Well, we could be talking about this for days and days. I mean, the amount of passion that this particular panel has on DevOps and DataOps is astounding. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of this particular session. So I want to thank the panel. Thank you very much for your insights, for all your conversations, for your perspectives on DataOps and on DevOps. And I also want to thank Garima and Sriram for enabling us having this wonderful conversation. We unfortunately have to wrap right now, but there is a data and DevOps track at DevOps Summit Canada 2021. So if you have not registered for it, please go ahead and register. It's going to be on November 8th and November 9th. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye.